All right, everyone. The DACA news is moving fast, which isn't really, it's not no confusion why that's happening, because we're getting towards the end stages of denial, I think, for the Democrats. The lamestream media has begun to openly speculate that they're going to have to cave in on the wall. They're going to have to fund Trump's wall, which means that his first big immigration victory is handed to him after relatively little struggle. He won't have to get any court involved. He won't have to invoke a nuclear option. He can just grab it up with the consent of a handful of Democrats. In return, he's openly talking to Schumer now. Schumer, of course, a few days ago said, "The wall is off the table. We're not funding it. We need DACA and we're not giving you the wall." Now Trump's saying, "Oh, yeah, I don't have a problem with partially restoring DACA, but I've got a few things that I want. I want the wall fully funded. It's not going to be partially funded. It's going to be fully, so that construction can immediately begin on the entire scope of it." That's a huge win for him, by the way. I'll buff up his support a few points among people that were further right that jumped off board because they thought he was waffling on it. He also wants, within DACA, an end to chain migration and certain parts of the visa lottery. Now, that is, he's trying to create a permanent fix instead of a temporary kick the can down the road kind of thing, like former Republicans have. Now, Spencer brought this up last night, and he said, well, ultimately this is pretty good, and some people are being unreasonable because they expect Trump to get everything and not negotiate at all, which isn't how things work. That's true. It's called pragmatism. If you want to stand solely on principle, you will get very little accomplished in life. Sometimes it coincides with reality. More often, because you're going to be an ideological purist often, it won't coincide with reality at all. The reality right now is that without invoking the nuclear option, Trump can't do diddly squat on his own on immigration, with the exception of continuing to use ICE as it currently stands to deport people. That, though, alone is worrying the Democrats because the deportation rate is higher now. It's a significant number of people. The number coming in is now lower than those being deported. They're looking at it as losing voters. According to their own little memo there from one of their, I think, PAC groups from about a month ago that was released. Well, I can't remember exactly which organization it was. They're like, oh yeah, we need to stand for the DREAM Act because these are going to be Democrat voters, 90% of them, and so we want amnesty because that's the only way they're going to be voting for you is if they become legalized. Trump, I can assure you, is never going to restore all of DACA unless he gets literally every other thing he ever asked for on immigration. In which case, yes, you get temporary amnesty for certain classes of people, but by and large, he wins 90% of everything for his core supporters. You would have a wall, no more sanctuary cities, no more chain migration / so-called anchor baby sort of situations, no diversity lottery, no significant refugee movements, an end to certain migrant groups. The only thing, by the way, within that bulk that I really would deeply oppose is actually the implementation of E-Verify. And some people have been pointing this out. E-Verify is a privacy concern for native citizens. It could potentially victimize people who are legal citizens. They were born in the United States. I happen to oppose E-Verify. If you simply stop the movement of illegal individuals, you don't have to worry about E-Verify, now do you? If you simply have a documentation system, no catch and release, a physical border, everything's working properly, everything's maintained, you've got enough border agents, you shouldn't really have a problem with E-Verify. And if a handful of businesses do end up hiring someone illegally under the table, it's the smallest thing in the world. It's like the one barnacle on the hull of your ship. It's not a major concern. Right now, the whole bottom of the ship is rusting out. You're sitting there worrying and maybe splitting hairs over a single barnacle being there. It's not exactly the same thing. But what I would say is this. Trump is also setting up something separately, I think. At this point, originally I thought that the sanctuary city crackdown, he'd probably go the legislative route. I now believe that's wrong. I think that he's going to shelve that because I think he knows Schumer's never going to give him sanctuary city crackdown plus MAGA wall in exchange for even full DACA. He knows that. So he's going to fixate on just the wall, which is the main thing from a strategy standpoint as far as the optics of immigration reform. He then uses the Supreme Court to smack down the sanctuary cities and states. Meanwhile, do you notice the strange hypocrisy where the states and localities that are sanctuary mode are saying, well, states The federal government doesn't have the right to tell us we can't shelter people here. Almost in a biblical sense, by the way. The Old Testament literally lays out the groundwork of exactly what they're doing. Like someone who's committed a crime can go to a certain location and not... And as long as they stay there, it's like a literal sanctuary. According to biblical tenets, it's actually a biblical thing from Judaism, post-Canaanite sort of paganism, as it were, during the oral tradition period. That's basically where it's from. What's happened is that he says, well, I don't need to bring this up to Schumer. I don't need the legislature to do anything. Clearly the federal government does have the right to legislate on it. So the courts will get involved. But at the same time, you look at a separate issue. And the states and localities, like left-wing ones, are actually arguing federal supremacy when it comes to the distribution of federal lands. You saw today, there was a leak. Apparently a memo, which usually that means Trump himself had a middleman dump it to see how people would react to the concept of a plan. I don't think it's a leaky ship so much. It's a very, very calculated, measured release of material that's still in draft form in order to see how people react to it so you can then further design it to maximize its popularity with your core audience. I think Trump's done this continuously for the last year, including when he was a campaigner. Actually, it was even before he took office he was doing this, A/B testing. Scott Adams mentioned it. You see that they're saying, no, the federal government shouldn't sell off land back to the states or townships or private individuals. No, the federal government needs to keep this land because, reasons like the states have no right to manage this land. But we do have the right to completely disrespect Congress authority. We do have the right to completely usurp all immigration law and to shelter people who are here illegally according to laws already passed and being enforced by the executive branch as per their constitutional right to do so. Isn't that very strange how the states' writers aren't states' writers anymore when they want the federal government to take responsibility for maintaining land? We don't want it developed. No, you're just worried about it. You know that it'll be popular once it's developed. The states will actually have, the federal government will no longer have to pay to maintain all this bullshit. The federal tax rate goes down, the states will have to up their tax rates, and the blue states will be the ones willing to do that, crushing their economies. The red states will outcompete them. That's what it's about. No, having federal land as opposed to state and local land helps blue states, doesn't help the red ones. Think about it from an economic standpoint. Which state government's going to raise taxes and which one's going to say, oh, well, we'll just reduce the amount of maintenance so we don't have to raise taxes. Then you think about the differential on whether those states will be business competitive. And then you've got your answer as to why they don't want Trump to loosen up the federal lands and give them back to the states. They don't want their own land to be under their own control. Think about that. It can only be for economic reasons. They're very, very worried. Trump's going to bring the recovery to flyover state / small town America / the Rust Belt by screwing the urban coasts. It's a really great idea. By the way, it'll help Vermont. We're an inland state. We're a small town, largely rural inland state. We just happen to be one that's blue and populated by pot-smoking hippies that, by the way, at this point are now doing it basically legally. It's not till June 1st, they would say. Well, yeah, no cop around here is going to care if you're smoking your joint. Just don't drive high. Just don't beat your wife and try to blame marijuana or some stupid shit like that, like people do in Colorado. Just don't do that. Nobody cares. Nobody cares if you got your one fucking juvenile claim. Yeah, it's federally illegal. On the state level, no one's going to do shit about it. But yeah, it's very, very funny to see them arguing both sides of the argument depending on how it affects them. As far as building the wall, it is clear. Trump already has the authority to do so. He simply needs to have the money allocated. Now, the amount that he's asking from Schumer is relatively small compared to the overall budget. You'd be surprised how cheap it actually looks like it's going to be, and I bet he's going to put all of his weight behind making sure it comes in under price and on time, because that's sort of the Trump way. He'd probably he'd command his kids, hey, free up $100 million, get some of our own workers in there and help them build the fucking wall. He'd probably end up doing something like that, paying out of pocket just to get it done quicker. Or he'll say, yeah, I'll sell a couple foreign skyscrapers and I'll donate a couple billion to the Build the Wall Fund too, just to make it quicker. He'll do that and he'll grandstand. By the way, some people will actually think, well, whoa, what a great president. He's paying for some stuff himself. I didn't have to pay a cent for it. Then he'll tell the nation of Mexico to reimburse him. By the way, he will make them pay for the wall. It's called taxing remittances. But that's a totally different struggle. He can't bring that up right now. That would poison the well of the debate with the Democrats he's having. He has to go slower. He has to measure himself out. Look, we're a year into his presidency, and people expect him to already have done everything that he said he would do. On the major issues, he either has already, like tax reform, he already accomplished. Then there are things like the wall where he's getting close, it seems, to accomplishing them in his first year, basically. That's not bad. And that's actually a pretty good start to his presidency. And once that tax reform kicks in, his approval is going to skyrocket. He will then gain a mandate to move faster. But he knows that he has to start slowly, and he has to start somewhere. This is the easiest thing to start with. It was a fumble. Not on Trump's part, but on McConnell's part. The GOP ignored Trump early on, Trump and Rand, and fumbled with the ACA. That slowed him down. He'd probably already have his wall funding by now if it weren't for their stupidity. By the way, there's a reason that for a long time there he wouldn't talk to Mitch McConnell. Mitch ended up probably having to bend knee before him in order to get him to take him to the golf course again. Paul Ryan, same thing. Now these people are basically at his best. He's got the rhinos, basically, it seems, eating out of his hand. All this stuff about, oh, Trump's people, sort of look at him sideways because they know he's demented, and they're really, the shadowy cabal runs things because he's crazy, or something like, I don't believe that. No, I don't believe that at all. And as for the Mueller investigation, his approval might rise before tax time comes anyway, because Mueller might have to come out and say Russia didn't collude with Trump. That would be funny. It'd be a 1-2 punch. Look, the Democrats would lose all credibility. Especially, and then you get the FISA memo to worry about. They've got nothing, dude. They don't have anything at this point. They don't realize how tenuous their slightly higher approval than the congressional Republicans is at this point. But their lay fans continue to be overly optimistic. I'm telling them, you don't want to be optimistic. You should be worried because of the actions of people like Pelosi and Schumer. But the fact that they're apparently not concerned is why they keep losing. Honestly, it's why they keep losing. That's about all. Peace out.